Good evening and welcome to the September regular meeting of the Eastchester Board of Fire Commissioners. We had quite a full agenda for executive session this evening, so we started early at 5:30. The time now is 7:30. So I'd like to kick off tonight's meeting with our treasurer's report from our treasurer, Jamie Hedstrom.
So tonight we have a few things to go through. I have my regular treasurer's report for the month, and then we can get into the budget after that. So for tracking for 2018, we're currently looking at the financials through August 31st, 2018. Our financials currently present a deficit of approximately $31,000. This is a decrease from July, which had a slight surplus. A lot of this is driven by the few lawsuits that we discussed at last month's meeting where we had settlements paid out. Those have now been paid out. They were not specifically budgeted for. Other than that, our other accounts are predominantly trending as expected, with the exception, once again, of overtime, just an update there. So we have to date received $175,000 approved in transfers. The last transfer was approved at last month's meeting for $50,000. Prior to that, we had expressed that with the new long-term injuries, we had estimated about $150,000 additional would be needed. Since then, we have a little more information on some of those injuries. That number looks more like $200,000, and we've received the transfer of $50,000. So to date, we have used, of what's been transferred over, we've used all but about $75,000 of it. So I'm not going to ask for the transfer this evening, but it's something just so we know where we stand on that. Obviously, it's up to the board if you are willing to entertain another transfer. We'll process another 2 payrolls between this month's meeting and next month's meeting, but that's our update there. If we were to make a transfer, we do have some room in the firefighter salary line for this due to timing of the budget, how we had positions budgeted versus when they were filled, retirements we've had, which all is contributing to the overtime. So that is an option, as well as we are looking at our pension costs coming in lower than anticipated, which again is partially tied to some of that same, not having the positions filled and some of the retirements bringing down the pension costs. Just
to be clear, there's enough left in the OT budget now to get us through to the October meeting?
If the overtime runs the way it has been, yes.
But
then we'll be in a position where a decision has to be made.
Okay. The October meeting is this third weekend, the third week of the month, not the second. Does that cover 2 or 3 pay periods?
There'll still only be 2. There'll be one in September and then one in October.
And the number that you mentioned, $200,000 to get us through based on current expectations as of today, we've put in a total of $675,000, so that would be a total, if the board were to approve a transfer of 200, it would be $875,000. Is that accurate?
Well, you already gave us 50, so we would still need basically 155. So yes, that would get you to, what would that get you to?
825?
Almost 8, yeah.
So
8 1/4.
Yeah.
All right.
My only concern here is we're starting to go into hurricane season, which we saw we're seeing it's going on in the Carolinas right now. And if one of those storms was to move north, I don't know if we want to live payroll statement to payroll statement and not have a cushion in your overtime budget during a volatile season.
I think I agree with you on that, but I would add the other point is that, to the extent we barely fund these things month to month, then if the board doesn't fully fund it, the chief has fewer levers to pull to make up that difference in just say the month of December or November and December if we get there. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have a conversation about this tonight. Otherwise, we may run out, as you say, and it also is going to limit the chief's options to take action. So I guess what I would say is finish the treasurer's report. We're going to come back to this when you're done.
Sure. So that's where we stand currently. As far as other matters, obviously the budget is the big thing for this evening. But the other thing I do want to mention is that we will be putting out our audit request for proposal, which is an RFP. So just to explain, we have an independent financial statement audit every year. We are required by the New York State Comptroller's Office to go out for bid every 5 years. It's a professional service. It's different than when we talk about like the work we're doing at Chester Heights or whatnot. So the requirements are very different. It's not, you don't have to go with the lowest bidder. It has different requirements, but we are required to put out the RFP. So I have prepared the proposal. There is guidelines that are put out by the Comptroller's Office. Our attorneys have looked at it. It's pretty boilerplate from the last time when we did this. We are requesting to receive proposals by November 29th, to make a decision by December 13th, and then to be contracted with our audit firm by January 10th. Usually, like the 2018 audit will usually start in either March or April. So that timing it works out fine. It's in line with what we've done in the past. We will need to publish in the Journal News. We need to put out that we're that we're requesting RFPs and give audit firms the information that they need to come to us to request the RFP. And then we are required on that November 29th date to publicly open the bids. It doesn't need to be done in a public meeting. It doesn't need to have the commissioners. It's not a meeting. It doesn't need to be videotaped. It doesn't need minutes, but it's just, if anyone is interested and wants to hear the bids read, assuming based on what we receive. But so that is one thing I want to do tonight. This way we can get this out in the newspaper to give whichever audit firms are interested, ample time to prepare their proposal. The proposal is for 1 year with a renewal option up to 5 years. That's the maximum that's allowed by the Comptroller's Office.
In fire districts, this is unique to fire districts. Towns and villages don't need to go for RFPs for audit services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to do that motion?
Sure. Well, why don't we'll do the motion for audit services. So I'll propose it. Motion to allow the board chairman to publish the official public notice newspaper, the Journal News, an RFP for auditing services for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2018, with an option to renew for a term not to exceed 5 years. The RFP is expected to be advertised in the Journal News in September 2018, with bids required by November 29, 2018, and bid awarded in December 2018. I made the motion. Would someone like to second it? Okay. And I will poll the board. Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Commissioner Rabin?
Aye.
Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
Aye.
I am an aye. Okay. Motion carries. Ayes all around. Okay.
So that's it for the monthly treasurer's report. I don't know if you want to move right into the budget or you want me to come back later.
Yeah, no, I think we should go right into the budget.
Okay. All right, so then tonight we're also looking at the proposed budget for 2019. We'll have a budget hearing next month on October 16th, as required for any public comment between now and then. At that time, if there's no comment, we'll be able to move forward with adopting the proposed budget. So just some of the highlights for this year's budget, just as a reminder, we stayed flat last year. We did not have a tax increase for 2018, even though, we do have a number of costs that are rising that are out of our control. Predominantly we have contractual salary increases of 2.25%, and also, our healthcare costs have been significantly increasing, which is, again, outside of our control. Last year, NYSHIP estimated approximately a 9.1% increase. This year, as of June, they're anticipating a 7.1% increase, but usually by this time in the year, we receive another notification from them of a higher number. It usually gets more realistic towards the end of the year. We did not receive that yet this year. So those are some things to keep in mind. Also, pension rates are increasing, even though we will probably get some relief based on the fact that we've had some top-tier firefighters retired, the old chief, and we are bringing in newer employees who are paying into the system, so that'll probably even itself out. Obviously, we are in the middle of significant capital improvements down at Chester Heights, and we have a list, behind that of other stations that will need renovations. This budget also includes necessary upgrades to our radio system, which is a complete overhaul of the system, as well as the bottle cascade system. Most notably, we are planning on purchasing and prepaying for a ladder truck this year in 2019. And so, given all of that, we are looking at coming in a budget of a very modest increase of just 2.23%. And we're able to do that by, for instance, the ladder truck we are looking at, we're going to finance with cash. So this year, we're really looking at spending down the reserves that we have accumulated over time, and doing it in a way that is, prudent and in the best interest of the district. A lot of the increases that I just discussed, like if you just looked at, let alone, just the anticipated increase in healthcare itself would be enough to need over a 2% increase to the budget. So by taking that into account while also, replacing those systems we talked about, we're going to be paying the final payment on the engines that we commissioned. So I think, we really came in, pretty conservative and pretty reasonable considering we did have the ability to increase taxes, over 4% without going over the tax cap, based on last year. So that's what we're looking at right now. So I think that, it's a fairly modest increase when you consider that salaries alone are going up 2.25%, and there's other, costs that are increasing well above inflation that we don't have any control over. So we really are trying to, look at our costs and spend our money and, spend the taxpayers' money, in everyone's best interest.
Okay. I'd just like to say that, thank you for your hard work on the budget. Jamie spent tremendous time and working with each one of us individually and collectively. I think, I'll let others speak for themselves, but I believe the consensus is that we think we tried very hard to keep the increase as modest as it is. I think it is reflection of some good managing that's taken place over a longer period of time. As Jamie said, look at just our salaries and healthcare costs, which make up the biggest part of our budget, a very large percentage, and they're over the 2.23 that we're raising taxes overall. We were able to do this to some extent because we did put a lot of money in reserve that we're using for the capital projects that now we're embarking on, and I think it's a good budget. We didn't raise taxes last year, as a reminder, and so over a 2-year period, it's about 1.1%, and hopefully taxpayers find that refreshing in this day and age. So, does anybody else want to make any comments?
Yeah, I'll say we have no debt, which is fairly unique for a municipality. We're probably the only public entity in town that has no debt. Zero. We have no debt that rolled off in the last few years and no debt in the future, right now we don't have any debt. So I think that's kind of key. And when Jamie mentioned the pension line, people always are curious what happens with pensions with firemen who get pensions after they leave. The way New York State works is they have 7.5% they use as an actuarial number that their investments are going to make in their pension plan. And when pension plan doesn't make that 7.5%, they come to the local district, or whether it's a town or a village or in our case, a fire district, and they want us to make up the difference why they didn't earn 7.5%, so someone can earn in their retirement years without contributing. So that number is generally around 26% of the person's salary. So the newer firemen, it comes in around 19%, but the older firemen, tier 2 people, it's around 26%. So when a fireman retires, it's their state's obligation to pay them, but the state's actuarial math is 7.5%. We make up the difference, so that's why you see the pension lines in our budget. After they retire, we're only on the hook for their health care at this point. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just reiterate, thank you so much for all the work you've done, the chief as well, and helping out and giving us a better picture of what we're looking to do in 2019. I know we all have different ideas of projects and materials, supplies, and other apparatus we'd like to afford as we go forward, but I think this is a fair budget. I think, as you said before, it does allow us the opportunity to replace a ladder truck, which I think is something the chief has been very excited for. And this budget, again, I think is fair. The amount of money that we could potentially raise this budget is more than this, and I think we're doing the right thing by demonstrating that we're spending the money that we've had in our surplus on and earmarking it for some really great projects that will continue into 2019, and new ones like the radio and the bottle cascade system and the truck. And as echoing what Dennis was saying, as costs go up, we're making those adjustments as best we can to benefit both the district and the taxpayer. And I think that's everyone's goal up here, is to make it the best fire department, but also the most affordable for the residents. So this is definitely a step in the right direction from a flat previous year. So thank you. I think it's great.
I should have said thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Well said.
Collective thank you, for sure.
Okay, if everybody else good? All right, so what happens now is the board will vote to adopt this proposed budget. And then by general municipal law, we're going to meet again on October 16th to have a budget hearing, at which point the public will have an opportunity to speak, and then the board will vote to adopt the budget. So for now, I'm going to make a motion to adopt the proposed budget, 2019 budget, with total fire district expenditures of $17,241,456.33. 17,241,456.33, not including the purchase of a ladder truck, which will be financed through the use of appropriated fund balances and not through a tax increase. The proposed tax increase is a 2.23%, provided that certiorari and the town's tax rule is identical year over year. So I will make that motion. Will anyone second it? Okay. And I will poll the board. Tom?
Aye.
Dennis? Or
Aye.
Commissioner Winter? I'm an aye. Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
And Commissioner Rabin?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So again, 7 o'clock on October 16th will be the budget hearing, and we welcome everyone to attend. So we have that coming up. Okay, I think we'll circle back now on a finance issue to the overtime budget. So I think Commissioner Winter's absolutely right. You know, we don't want to, run things too thin, and then we have a situation, an emergency situation, and we have to bring resources in, and we don't have the money, and the board can't convene in time to allocate it. So I think we definitely want to make some sort of contribution. At the same time, I think we also need to, figure out whether or not, what our line is. Is there one in terms of how much funding we're going to put in this budget through the remainder of the year? And, ultimately what this means is if we fund it with less than, what we need, the chief will have to make some tough decisions, which may include temporarily closing a firehouse. Now, the board certainly can meet again and add additional monies before the end of the year to do it. But I guess the question, I've raised this a number of times, and I do have a lot of concern about the extremely high incidence of sick rates in the department. They've been over 7%. They've been trending down slightly through the end of August. They're currently at 6.64%. These are levels that historically we did temporarily close a firehouse strategically at points that we felt that we could do it without materially impacting the safety of the community. So I guess, everybody's kind of voiced opinions over time, and I understand and I appreciate, and I will reiterate, nobody wants to close a firehouse. Nobody on this board. I think we're all in solid agreement over that. But the question that I have for the board, and the question I've asked myself is, what's the line? Like, can we allow sick rates to come in at 15% and we're still going to just transfer money over and pay it? At what point do we say, enough is enough? And so, I am, kind of the mindset that, we're straddling that line. We're right there. But I'll give others an opportunity to say their piece on it. And I'll open it up. Dennis, you want to start with something?
I think it's hard to say with the sick rates. The sick rates, you have a number of members who get sick with long-term injuries. They're, some cases life-changing injuries that, they have no control over. And so that happens. And then you have which you may think are some of the questionable calls where people call in before their holiday or before a vacation and they're calling in sick. And so those are the questionable ones. But I think it's very difficult. This has been an issue to try to manage for years, and I have never been successful at trying to manage someone's sick time. I just haven't. The contract is worded and the way it's worded, and the firemen have certain rights and people have rights, and it's very difficult to manage the sick time, or you force people into work and that type of thing. So I have not been successful at figuring that out. I don't know if any board member is ever going to be successful doing it. It may be a contract negotiation, but at this time I'm not willing not to move money to help to keep the overtime going. I think you need to keep the overtime going. Because I think a lot of the membership that are sick right now are truly sick, and they have serious issues. I also think we should break down our sick time by rank. In other words, what percentage of the sick time is being generated by firefighter rank? What percent is being generated by lieutenants or captains rank? Because right now you have lieutenants and captains in the past 6 months who have been more affected on a percentage basis, let's say, than the firefighter ranks. And I would bet there's more money going to captain and lieutenant's ranks per member because of you've had a captain and some lieutenants out for a long period of time, and those cost you a lot more to fill than a fireman's rank. So, yeah, my point is I think we have to make a decision to move some money. I don't think we're going to solve the global problem of sick leave right now.
Does anybody else want to?
I concur with Dennis. I mean, there's a certain amount that I think we need to keep flush for these situations, but it's going towards
I agree, and I personally will join in putting more money in transferring some funds so we don't come up short, especially heading into what could be a hurricane coming up. But again, it is a matter of how much and whether or not we want to consider fully funding this. And again, I'll just a couple of points I want to reiterate. We do have extra staffing built in that theoretically allows us to cover a sick call without bringing someone in on overtime. And the overtime numbers reflect, a certain amount of money for the types of injuries and illnesses and sick calls that Dennis has described. And like I said, in the past, we have done this. And I would say that there is precedent of neighboring communities doing it as well. And they're doing it for, plain budgetary reasons, not even for excessive, sick rates. They take advantage of, we have a mutual aid system in Westchester County, whereby neighboring communities will help fill in if we have an issue. And we are a net provider of mutual aid. We provide it more often, I believe significantly more often than we get it. And again, I would only suggest this is a measure if our operational leadership, with the assistance of mutual, or if I believed that I felt we could do this without materially impacting the safety of the community. So that's my 2 cents. But as far as what we want to do tonight, does somebody want to propose a number? Does somebody want to,
I think if Jamie thinks we can get through 2 pay periods on $75,000, right, $78,000, I think he said, why don't we just do $78,000, would give you an extra 2 pay periods, and that would give you time for, if you did have we did, basically, if you have a hurricane, here's what happens. If you had a hurricane come up here or a natural disaster, you don't worry about how much overtime you spend, because one FEMA is going to cover not only your overtime, they're going to cover your fire trucks usage, they're going to cover your firehouse, they cover a lot. So, but it's a it's a timing issue. They will pay you back over time. So I would say we should just move 2 pay periods at this point in time. That moves us a month out. And that solves it till, in your October meeting, you can focus on it during the budget meeting.
Okay, so are you making that motion for $78,000, and we would move it from, you said firefighter salaries, we could do it? Okay. Does
So
someone
let's
want to second that?
What's
Is
your
that a
2 line?
motion?
Yeah, Jamie, why don't you read your motion that we're going to be doing?
So then the request would be to move $78,000 from line item 3410.15, which is uniform firefighter salary, to 3413.1, which is firefighter overtime.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll poll the board. Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Commissioner Winter?
Aye.
I will say aye, but want to revisit it again. Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
And Commissioner Raven?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa, you can use the wording just as you heard it.
Next up, payment of the bills. Now, the board has reviewed the bills and warrants and makes a motion to pay them. There are 3 sets of warrants. The first set of warrants dated 8/30/2018, totaling $404,451.05. The second set of warrants dated 9/11/2018, totaling $213,033.42, and a credit card bill dated 9/18/2018 in the amount of $2,460.10. Total of all bills is $619,946.57. I will make that motion. Do I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, and I will poll the board. Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Commissioner Winter?
Aye.
I am an aye. Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
And Commissioner Raven?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And Chief, if we go to cell 27, take the tires off.
Okay, Lisa, did everybody get back down the minutes? Did they read them?
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll see how this goes. Approval of the minutes. Secretary Gutierrez has proposed the minutes for the board meetings held on the following dates. August 13th, special board meeting attended by everyone up here tonight. August 14th, 2018, regular board meeting, again, attendance by everyone here. I will make the motion to adopt those minutes. Do I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And I will poll the board. Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Commissioner Winter?
Aye.
I am an aye. Commissioner Laurie?
Before I vote, I just want to ask Lisa, did you get my email back? Because in one of those sets of minutes, it said that the volunteer chaplain wasn't certain if he was going to be the chaplain anymore, and I emailed you back, said he was transferred to the Bronx. And we're waiting for the pastor to get a new priest, and then he's going to appoint him as our chaplain. So I did send that back to you to correct that in the minutes. Okay, other than that, I agree, aye.
Did we have that information at the last meeting, or you learned it since?
I gave it to you in August that he was transferred in July.
Okay, yeah, all right, so, sorry. All right, yeah, so with that modification.
Reverend Waldell.
Yeah, okay.
Is resigned.
And Commissioner Raven. Okay, motion carries. Adopt the minutes. Now I ask Chief Tween if he can give his monthly report, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Monthly activity report, August 2018. Total alarms for the month was 326, 13 fire-related, 171 were EMS or rescue-related. We gave mutual aid twice, once to New Rochelle Fire Department and once to Hartsdale Fire Department, and we received mutual aid from 2 departments at the same evening, once from New Rochelle, who assisted, and Mount Vernon Fire Department both assisted. While we were at the fire at Midland Gardens, they went to a kitchen fire at the Avalon Building on Parkway Road in Bronxville. So thank you to both those departments for assisting us in our time of need. The Station 4 exterior project is in full swing, as the commissioners are well aware. And as the interior project appears to be starting later than anticipated, I had maintenance mechanic Tim Dalton, after consulting with our oil burner repair company, he was able to get the boiler restarted, although it is leaking water, an ongoing issue that we knew was going on at the end of last winter. We should be able to have it last hopefully a few more months. If there's any major repairs that are going to be needed, the boiler company is not willing to come repair it. Any minor repairs they will take care of, but they've said that they've been telling us for a while that it needs to be replaced. And just while we know the firehouse will have to close as the interior renovations and the apparatus floor are being replaced, I hope we can minimize the amount of time that the firehouse will be out of service, and just to assure residents that we will reopen it when the renovations to the interior and the floor is replaced, are completed. The August sick leave, as the commissioners mentioned, we still have 4 members out on long-term absence, but 1 captain is cleared to come back to duty tomorrow, so that will leave us with 3 members out on long-term absence. Vehicle maintenance continues through the use of outside vendors. Last month I mentioned car 2102 had an accident and a door handle issue. All those repairs have been completed. The vehicle is back in service. Ladder 16 is at Ruscon, our outside vendor for maintenance, getting its regular service. Should be completed tomorrow, and we should be able to pick it up tomorrow or the next day. Ladder 15 has been in service for about 3 weeks. It had its aerial certification last week, and it was noticed, and the guys even noticed before it had its certification, that it was leaking coolant. Ruscon came and found the water pump was defective, which caused it to be out of service for 3 days. For those 3 days, we ran with 1 truck. We still had the correct staffing as we put engine 28 back in service as an engine. We put some extra truck equipment on there, such as saws. As I said, the spare ladder truck is over 30 years old now, and that is the reason that we're looking to replace ladder truck. So the 15-year-old ladder truck will become the new spare when we get the new truck. That would be ladder 16 would go into reserve as ladder 15. And Tim Dalton's been doing a great job, and he's been working on numerous repairs. Fire prevention and code enforcement have been busy with numerous plans and inspections. Their new computers were purchased and installed, and they've been up and running. At the August 13th fire at 6 Midland Gardens, there was an issue with a air conditioner that was plugged into a power strip. So the Bronxville Village Administrator, Jim Palmer, asked if we could have somebody come to the village board meeting, which was held last night, and Captain Pinaval attended and discussed some fire safety issues, as well as avoiding plugging appliances into power strips. One last thing, I did give the Board of Elections permission to use Station 3 as a polling place for the primary election, which I believe is on Thursday, and also for the general election, which will be in November. And in closing, I respectfully request that the board close tonight's meeting with a moment of silence in memory of all the first responders, civilians, and members of the military that have been lost as a result of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Thank you.
Chief, I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, in section 2 where it says August continue with 4 members
Yes,
and 1 returned, does that mean there's 3 still out in this sentence? Or there's
after
4?
tomorrow. So right now, there's 4 out. Tomorrow, Cap Miazzo is cleared for full duty, went to his return fitness for duty exam and was cleared. So his group's working tomorrow. He's actually has a mutual, so he won't be in tomorrow, but he's cleared for duty tomorrow.
All right, so that means that we only have, that's 3 then?
There'll be 3
After-
people.
Beginning tomorrow?
Yes,
So
and
3 people are out?
Yes.
Long-term illness out
Yes.
of the 74?
And also just to mention that one of the big things that increases the overtime is during the summer, a lot of the members take their float days. So the float days do create a lot of overtime because currently and in the past years, we have not been at full staffing. So any of the float days would create overtime. From now, after Labor Day through the end of the year, there's a lot fewer float days. So that's going to be a lot less overtime just from that. And, you know, even the vacations get slightly lighter on the firefighters' end. So I anticipate just through the normal course of the summer is the heaviest season for vacations and float days, that any outages, you know, people being out at those time of year is going to create overtime. So I think there'll be less overtime just from the fact that there's much fewer float days that will create overtime. So I think the overtime is going to get better in the next 3 months, 4 months, just from that.
Chief, can I ask you, when is the vacation scheduling commence for 2019?
I'll put out the group changes because to even out the seniority, we've had several senior members retire. So usually we get them out the first week of October, and that's when the members would start picking.
Okay.
And they have a limited time frame to pick, right? As soon as you,
They get 1 tour, which is 4 days. So if they get it on a Monday, they have to have their picks in on Friday, and then it goes to the next guy.
Okay. All right. Next up, discussion of absentee ballots in fire district election. Last week, we discussed the idea of allowing absentee ballots in the upcoming election. Basically, there's nothing that prohibits us from doing this. We do have to notify the Board of Elections 60 days before the election. Given that our next scheduled meeting is the 15th, we've got to decide tonight. I did ask, I mentioned at the last meeting that I was going to reserve, opinion on my thoughts until we got information from the Board of Election on just how many people in the town of Eastchester are identified as disabled. So we did get those numbers. There's 175 people designated as such who would qualify to submit an absentee ballot. You know, I couldn't find the total number of registered voters. Does anyone know it off the top of their head? But we have roughly 2,000 people vote in fire district elections.
No. 1,000.
Excuse me. All right. We've had up to 2,000 people vote in the fire district. I misspoke. Excuse me.
generally 3%, about 3 to 4% of the registered voters vote. I think your number is somewhere in around 20,000 plus is registered voters. Stu, you probably have a better handle.
No.
Let's round.
Quite sure.
You know, even if we rounded up and said 5%, you're talking 5% of 175 if disabled voters voted in the same frequency as the population. So, I mean, I'm kind of torn over this because I do think it's going to create a fair amount of additional work. And what we're talking about here is maybe 10 people who take advantage of it for this reason. There may be others, I guess, if we allow vacations and things like that. Those, I'm a little bit like, I certainly want to give these people who are permanently disabled an opportunity to vote via absentee ballot. On the vacation stuff, I'm a little less, unsure of how we would verify that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I guess, to be honest, I'm not sure personally how I want to go here. So I'm going to open it up for discussion and see if anybody wants to take a lead.
Well, I'll make a comment right off the bat. If we're after helping the disabled vote, I believe they have to come to headquarters and sign for the ballot and then return the ballot. That's not ADA compliant, so that, how are they getting up those stairs? So if the process is for the disabled, we've already excluded them because they have
But
to.
I don't think the actual disabled person has to come. I think someone can come on their behalf. They just have to be, have the disabled status with the Board of Election.
Well, it might be different than the general election, but I think you have to actually apply for the application, then it's sent to you, and then you send it back.
Well, this Westchester County Board of Elections has nothing to do with the process. Okay, the fire district election is run exclusively by the fire district. The Westchester County Board of Elections supplies the books, the registered voter lists. That's what we get from them. That's their role. The election is administered locally usually by the person who is considered your secretary to the board of, your fire district secretary runs the election by law. So if you could limit it to people who are permanently disabled, I don't know if you could. If you could, that would be an ideal solution. I happen to think absentee ballots open the door for abuse that I've seen in the past. And these are very small elections, very small turnouts, and that's what happens. These are very, very low turnout elections. You only get literally between 3 and 5% of the population votes, and that's just the public is unwilling to vote in these elections, what it comes down to.
Well, the last meeting you had said that you were at the Tuckahoe Senior Citizens, and you said that you observed that the people at the Senior Citizens said, who needs an absentee ballot? And you said 25 people raised their hand and got the absentee ballot, just like that. I went to the Senior Citizens and I asked the lady in charge, and she says, we never handed out any absentee ballots.
She didn't.
You don't want to let me finish?
Okay, finish.
She says, we never handed any absentee ballot out. I said, well, Commissioner Winters said that he was here and he observed 25 people received an absentee ballots, and her words were, she doesn't even know Commissioner Winters. And she said she never got involved in that and never handed any absentee ballot out.
Okay, you done?
Yeah, but I'm done.
So what I observed years ago, and this is probably over 10 years ago, is that someone would, during a bingo game, would walk in and say, who would like an absentee ballot? And the hands would go up, and then they'd walk around and hand the release forms to get the absentee ballot. And then that person would gather them all up, bring them up to the firehouse, at that time, the treasurer of the
Yeah,
fire.
but you didn't say that way.
Well, that's what I'm saying, how it works. This is not a county election.
I know,
They would
but
go
you-
up to the firehouse, they would submit the letters of people requesting absentee ballots. The absentee ballots would go back to the bingo hall while those people are still playing bingo, and they would have them, this was years and years ago, and then they would sign up. And we haven't had absentee ballots since then, I don't think. And so, that's how abuses can happen, and therefore, I'm not a fan of absentee ballot. I mean, as much as I would like not to disenfranchise anyone, I just happen to think absentee ballots, when you only have part-time employees working in the front office, pose a problem. And we run these little, I mean, basically fire district elections were designed by law, the way they had them designed was for fire companies to elect their own people. And that's why they'd have them in December around the same time as a holiday party. And that's why you'd have these elections were designed for a small group of people to elect their own board members, to run these organizations that spent no money. They were, the volunteer companies didn't have a lot of money, and that wasn't designed for running these municipalities the way we run them now. We have a $17 million budget, as big as the village of Bronxville, as big as the village of Tuckahoe, and we'll get 600 people voting in this election out of the whole town, not just Bronxville, Tuckahoe, all of them, Bronxville, Tuckahoe, and Eastchester, 600 people. So you don't get people coming out voting. It's not our problem they don't come out to vote, it's the public's.
I think you went around the whole thing. Never mind 600 voters, 200 voters. You told the public last time that that's what you observed. 25 people raised their hand, 25 people were handed an absentee ballot. That's not so, and we know that's not so. But we know how the absentee ballots are given out. Now, if 10 people came here, we would advise them to go to see Lisa and get them, and she would have to hand them out. with a signature of the individual, okay? It's not that you're gonna get them out like somebody's handing out door prizes.
Well, somebody come, okay. I'm
So
not-
Dennis, hold on.
I've already-
The last time we did absentee ballots, in the best of your memory, was what, 2001?
He said
Probably
10 years
sometime
ago.
around 2000 and,
You said 10 years ago.
All right.
over 10 years ago.
Well, sure. Your email to, when you were providing information for us to review, showed that it was 2001, and it was 3 people running, right? So it was yourself and 2 other people running. So we had absentee ballots then. And there was 70 absentee ballots at that time.
Right.
Not saying that that turnout would be identical to now, but at that time, 17 years ago, there was about 70 ballots. I agree that I believe that the option should be there. I think everybody should be able to take part in the process and be able to get an absentee ballot. I also think that the district has a responsibility to be capable of providing that benefit, which is something that we probably have not put enough time or money or resources into before, let's say, last month. If this is something that we think that we can do even on a moderate level, considering that we are running it and not the Board of Elections, I would be in favor of it. You would be asking Lisa or anybody else to take that endeavor on, and we haven't even had that type of conversation. I think that an absentee ballot program could just be very simply, similar to the Board of Elections. You could pick it up in the firehouse, but you're required to mail it back. That way there's a postage date, you can't drop it off. That's one thing. They're all free. And if they hand them back or they're postmarked in time, or actually, if they're postmarked in time, then we could take it. I don't know financially how much more work it is if we're running it. Can't we keep the cost down to a minimum if we're running it?
It's not the counting and the postage. I'm more concerned about the verification and stuff like that if we've got a close election. And listen, if we could, if the Board of Elections said you could limit this to only people that we've designated as permanently disabled, so in other words, they've already filled out the paperwork, in a heartbeat, I would say, all right, let's do absentee ballots. This way it eliminates all the other potential, issues. I don't know if we can do that. And I guess, even if we can't, so that's really the big question. I mean, I would say, yeah.
Dissect
I
the
would,
population.
if I was to vote for this and agree to allow absentee ballots, the way I would want to put this motion forward would be that we restrict it to that, and if that is not possible, then we follow the normal process for absentee ballots and make them available to
Your
all.
proposal works. I think you say we'll approve absentee ballots for anybody who's on the qualified list of disabled people in Westchester County Board of Elections. And if somebody's not on that list, they have ample time to get themselves on the list. And the other thing I would recommend is the commissioners stay away from soliciting absentee ballots. I don't think we should be in the business of near it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
But what if the Board of Elections says we can't,
They're not involved in fire district elections. I don't think they are. So if they tell us the resolution's wrong, you're shaking your head. Yeah.
I think
So
we'd be
we
looking
can-
at state
we can-
voting
If we
law.
set that policy, I don't think anybody can criticize us because we're saying if you're a disabled person and you're registered with the county as being disabled, you have a right to an absentee ballot. And
all right.
therefore-
The only other caveat I would add is that, if council blesses that,
Yeah.
and, and if they don't, if they said that if you do absentee ballots, it has to be available even to someone who's out of town on business for that day, then I say we still move forward with absentee ballots. Because I don't want to deny the people an opportunity to vote because we can't, thread the needle and get exactly what we want. So that's all.
I think if someone's over 18 years old in that school, they should be able to do an absentee ballot. I mean, every voter should have the opportunity to vote.
You go
Okay,
to-
so
Go to
does-
your local place, pick it up, and then mail it back.
Well, that's what we need to determine, how we're going to do it. I think that either we put it on public access TV or some way, or our paper of record, say, if you want an absentee ballot, you have to email.
Just send it in by U.S. Postal Service, period.
Well, they have to get it first, no?
Just send your letter, and you can send them back a ballot.
Oh, just do it by letter, not email? Okay, whatever way you want to do it is fine with me.
All right, so.
I did it many times, Tom. When I was in the service, I used to request an absentee ballot. They sent it to me. I'd send it back, and it was here.
All right, I like it.
Somebody want to propose a motion?
I propose the motion.
All right, and what?
the motion say?
Yeah, in other words, is it just absentee ballots in general, or is it if you're, you know?
Well, I'm not gonna segregate it, say that only if you're sick and only if you're a college student. I let everyone get it, if that's the way we're gonna do it.
Okay, so will someone second that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay, so motion's on the table, let's hold a vote. Commissioner Raven?
Aye.
Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
I'm gonna say aye. Commissioner Winter?
Generally, no.
All right, Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We're going to have absentee ballots in this year's election. So, Lisa, if you can make that happen.
Oh, we should have an agreement that commissioners don't request absentee ballots.
Only a registered voter can,
This is only for the 2018 fire. I believe
Right.
that we
Yeah,
have-
each year we'll do it again.
I would make a motion that commissioners do not request absentee ballots.
I will second that motion.
Absentee ballot for what?
Request for absentee ballots, commissioners should not be requesting them. We should be away from the
For
election.
themselves? Is that what you're
For-
saying?
No, I understand what he's saying. I think that it's important. I think that commissioners, if they find out from a resident that they want to have, that they need an absentee ballot, they need to infer to that person that they have to contact the district themselves.
Absolutely.
No one is picking up paperwork for anyone, and no
Right.
one is providing. And secondly, I also believe that no commissioner should, we can add to that no commissioner should be involved in the delivery or counting or disposal of those as well.
Correct.
That way, it's completely
That's the way it is. Yes.
away.
We're all good on that, right?
We're all
Yeah.
good. We did. No, we voted. Motion, everybody,
Motion
Dennis was,
carried.
yeah, Dennis was the only dissenter.
Actually, I don't think we did vote.
We did.
Okay.
Can we play the camera back? We need somebody.
Oh, no, we didn't vote on that.
Oh, yeah, we don't have to vote on that. That's just, yeah, we don't need to vote.
You just know you're not handing out
Yeah.
absentee ballots to
Yeah.
commissioners.
All right.
More or less, a commissioner can't be a messenger for someone.
Okay, moving on. Discussion of Chester Heights renovation. We received a change order to replace 12 brick panels in the facade of Chester Heights. We initially intended to restore these panels, but once the scaffolding went up and they were inspected, sounded, it was clear that it was more prudent way to proceed was to replace them. This work includes demo, new sheathing, new waterproofing system, new flashing, and new brickwork. I am making a motion to approve change order 101 for $18,600 for the EFD Station 4 restoration project. I am, actually, at first, that's the motion, but does anyone have any comments? Anything?
I have a question. How many square feet?
To be honest, Tom, it's 12 panels, and my guess is each panel is probably 3 feet by, I don't know, 4 feet, 6 feet kind of thing, so I don't know the exact
But a
number,
significant area.
It's a significant area, but the bigger thing is the prep work that's going on here. I was over at the house the other day, and it's an extensive waterproofing system that goes on behind this once they pull the panels off. There's a very good flashing system that goes in place at the bottom of these things. They're going to be watertight, and it was just, like I said, it was clear once they got up close and were able to sound them that these needed replacement. So
And BJB is the one that made the estimate?
BJB pointed it out to the architects on the project through FSI. FSI went up and did the inspection themselves. It was brought to their attention. They agreed. There's a process with these change orders that BJB has to go through, which we distributed to the board, but FSI does a fair price analysis to make sure that, what they're putting on here for each step of the process represents a market kind of rate. And they basically put their imprimatur on, whether or not this is a valid change order and the board should consider it, which they've done. So motion to approve change order 101 for $18,600 for EFD Station 4 restoration project. I make the motion. Do I get a second?
Second.
Okay, I think Dennis may have jumped you on that one, so.
We'll take him.
You got it.
I got
All right.
it, okay, fine.
And now I'll poll the board. Commissioner Rabin?
Aye.
Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
I am an aye. Commissioner Winter?
Aye.
And Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Staying with Chester Heights. All right, the board, as we've mentioned many times, once this phase of the project is complete, which is exterior restoration from the roof line down, the board intends to tackle the inside of the building. We've requested a proposal for A&E services from the architect who's done the first two phases of this project, FSI Architecture. This phase 3 is going to include replacement of the floor, which basically the apparatus floor. There's a basement in the building, so all the supports will be taken out, the concrete floor taken out. There'll be new steel structure put in place, and then a new concrete floor poured. Interior modifications, kitchens, bathrooms, bunk room, new entry addition with elevator to make it ADA compliant, new HVA system, interior lighting and electrical upgrades except the panel, which was done a few years ago, interior painting finishes, waterproofing of the cellar, second floor repainting refurbishment, IT support, so we could have our meetings there potentially if we want. The proposal from FSI is all-inclusive. It covers all phases of the project, including preliminary planning and concept design, design development, construction document phase, bid phase, building department expediting phase, and project management phase. The proposal is AON, but there is a right to cancel, to terminate the agreement at any time for any reason, and we would retain a license on the work that was done up to that point. Although if we do terminate, their liability for the design work goes away. Each phase is priced out. Some phases are hourly billing with a not-to-exceed cap. If we hit the cap on those two phases, the total contract cost for this proposal will be $282,000. We are hopeful that it'll come in below that because they won't use all the hours in these two not-to-exceed phases, one of which is by far and away the biggest price component of the contract, or excuse me, of the proposal. By the way, we're going to vote to approve the proposal once, if the board chooses to do so. At that point, a formal AIA contract will be drawn up. Our attorneys who have already looked at the proposal work on it with us, and we'll sign that. You know, I would say that, you know, we have a good sense of what the project is going to cost. We've had a facilities condition report done on this building several years ago. The architect is very familiar with the building, having done 2 projects there and having done the conditions report. And I firmly believe this is going to be a Wick's Law project, which means that it's going to be cost more than $1.5 million, which means that certain trades are going to have to face us as prime contractors, meaning that we're going to have independent contracts with what probably will be 4 different trades on this project. It makes it more complex. It's the law. It's how government bidding works, and we got to live by it. But that gives you an estimate of, you know, the kind of, based on what and I'm not going to kind of get into the detail of that now, but, you know, the fee is appropriate to the anticipated cost of the project. So I am going to, I guess, open it up to discussion, and then I'm going to make a motion to accept the proposal. So at this point, does anyone want to discuss it?
I'm not in agreement with this, using the contractor, excuse me, using the architect as well as your construction manager. So I'll have a disagreement with the rest of the board on this. I think if we're going to use a project manager, we should use an independent third-party project manager on a project of this scale versus using the architect. So I'm going to be a no vote on it. That won't carry the day, but my point is we should be using a third party. It's like using an auditing firm and an accounting firm being the same person. So that's my viewpoint.
I don't share Commissioner Winter's view on this. I think, you know, this project management component includes some part of that is construction administration, which we would, you know, and all of it. This is going to be complex work. There's going to be a lot of engineering work that goes on here, particularly with regards to the flooring system, which has to support an engine truck and potentially a ladder truck both, an elevator system, a new HVA system for the entire building. We need someone with the expertise to properly, you know, manage this project and make sure that whoever the winning bidders are, and again, we may have 4 separate prime contractors here, that they're doing the job as per the specifications that were written up by this contractor. This is a professional services contract, which is a little bit different than how other bidding works in municipal law. This, for professional services, we choose someone based on qualitative factors, not necessarily lowest bid. And we have experience with this architectural firm. As I said, they did a facilities condition report for us. They've done 2 projects, or have completed 1, or in the midst of another. I think that they're very good at what they do. I think the pricing is competitive, and I think they are best qualified to, you know, manage the project. And I also believe that using them will result in the lowest cost in delivering this project, and that's equally important to me, is that not only are we getting the job done right, but we're getting it done what I believe will ultimately be a lower cost than if we go the route that Commissioner Winter is suggesting, where we have these guys do construction administration and then hire another project manager who's capable of truly evaluating the work that was specified in the plans that our engineering firm developed. So does anyone else want to add anything?
Well, certainly we discussed it and talked quite a lot about it because we wanted to get it right. We're talking about well over $2 million to renovate a firehouse. I was surprised that no updating the electrical wiring wasn't included.
It is. It's just not
okay.
the panel. Apparently there was a fire there. Dennis could probably shed some light on it, but the panel was replaced not that long ago. So it's the electrical upgrades are part of the project, just not the panel.
Right. So I'm sorry, please.
Captain Dempsey saved the building years ago, and the firemen are giggling back there, but he saved the building from burning down, and we put a new 400-amp electrical panel in place, so that's what we got. Had we been a less aggressive firefighter service, we probably would have got a new building rather than a 400-amp panel. So that was that.
Okay, so make a motion to accept FSI's proposal, Eastchester Fire District, building addition, interior alterations, and restoration, project 805347. The board has received this proposal, has had time to review it. I make that motion. Do I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I'll poll the board. Commissioner Rabin. Aye. Commissioner Laurie.
Aye.
I am an aye. Commissioner Winter.
No.
And Commissioner Roach.
I'll vote yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Quick discussion of legal matters. We voted last month to settle. You know, one is done. The other one, there's a couple of minor technical things that need to take place, but for all intents and purposes, the settlements have been signed. So the 2 lawsuits I'm talking about, one is with a former employee, D. Costanzo versus the Eastchester Fire District, and the other one was with the town, the hydrant case, which was the town of Eastchester versus the Eastchester Fire District. Both of those cases have been settled under the terms that we discussed at our last meeting. Next up, firefighter hires. At a special meeting on August 13th, the board voted to hire Jack Calby and Paul Deneau as probationary firefighters. The applicants have passed their physical exams and other required testing and checks, and we welcome to the EFD. These new hires will attend the next firefighter training class scheduled for September 17th. Is that date correct?
No, it's a week later, the 24th.
I'm sorry,
It'll be
all right,
Monday, the
yeah.
24th.
Okay.
Their effective day is the 22nd.
Okay, and come online towards the end of this year. Congratulations to these two guys. We thought they were both excellent candidates, and that's why we chose them, and we believe they're going to make excellent firefighters. So this gives us full staffing. I don't think the department has had full staffing in a long, long time, so.
Potentially full staff.
Yeah.
Pending no retirements
All
early.
right, nobody retire until these guys come online, and after, so we could say we were fully staffed for some period.
And we interviewed 9 candidates. All of them were very qualified. We just picked what we thought was the best fit for the Eastchester Fire Department. We don't know if we'll be hiring any more candidates off of this list. There's a new test coming out in the spring of 2019. So I recommend all of our young men and women who are interested in being Eastchester Fire Department to look out for that test and to sign up for it and study hard and get the best grade you can. This way we can consider you for the job in a couple of years.
You can get yourself on a mailing list or an email list of Westchester County Civil Service, or they call it Westchester County Human Resources, and Westchester County administers that test. And the window to get your application is usually 4 weeks. It usually comes out in the middle of December, and you have to the middle of January to get your paperwork in. Then the test is usually in March. If they follow the same sequence, right after Christmas, you'll see the notice, and then right around Martin Luther King's Day is the day to cut off, and then March is usually the test. But no one's going to tell you about it unless you go to the county website.
Okay. Next up, you know, we've spoken a lot about this over the last several months, but Commissioner Rabin has been working diligently on helping to form an ethics panel for the board and working to negotiate to hire ethics counsel. I'm going to turn it over to him now to give us some more information.
So as you were mentioning, I believe that we've come to the end of the search for the company that will be, or firm that we would be using to work hand in hand with the ethics panel on all legal matters, advisories, and other inquiries that they may have. The information was circulated to the board from Stephen Slednick, who is a member of the Morrison Law Firm located at 445 Hamilton Avenue in White Plains. They have offered their retainer agreement for our review and I guess a potential vote on in order to enter into that agreement. They will be involved with meeting with the board or the panel, the ethics board or panel, depending on what we call it, and attending its meetings if necessary, and requested to give advice and opinions and or drafting or reviewing documents as necessary. I think at this stage, the only matter hanging or floating in the wind that we'll have to discuss after this with this firm or any other firm is that we'll have to figure out a policy of how the ethics panel and its members would either gain access to that legal aid based upon making sure that costs are kept in check. Perhaps it has to be something that goes through the chairman of the panel, who then sends a request to the board, which then has to give a formal okay as to whether or not time on an attorney can be spent. We don't want anybody on the board to have the ability to run up legal bills just because they had questions. So I feel it's still going to come to us to approve time, or if there's a budget or billable hour request or need for a month, we're going to have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But I would be comfortable with providing this agreement to the board today to vote on as far as to compel the chairman to enter into it. According to the information provided, they are charging us a $235 per hour rate, plus smaller rates for smaller people who may, you know, less non-partner works on our agreements. Is these agreements generally show that amount will decrease. I think everybody's read it. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to be able to answer whatever I can. If it doesn't seem like that's something we want to move forward with tonight, and we need more time, then maybe perhaps we can revisit in October. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I read the agreement. You know, I would say a couple of things. The gentleman Stu has spoken to him, he came highly recommended. The hourly, I think, approximates the going rate for someone of his caliber. The agreement also allows us to cancel it, terminate it at any time without penalty. So if we're not happy with the service, but I don't anticipate that happening because we spent some time vetting this guy, he'll work with Stu to set up the panel. And, you know, listen, we've spoken a lot about this. We need it on the board, and I'm supporting this, so I would be comfortable entering into the agreement.
It was reiterated by our attorneys today earlier too, saying that this is why we need the panel for certain discussions and certain matters, so.
Right.
That certainly
So
could be
we just
vital.
get a motion to hire him and move on.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
And from my understanding of the email he sent and you forwarded, was that he doesn't need a retainer. It's just be billable hours.
Correct, it's just
We'll
a retaining for his services, but it's all billable hours. There's no initial fee payable by the district to him.
I mean, obviously, we don't know who's going to be on the panel yet. It's going to be a three-person panel. We know yourself as the
Yeah.
vice chairman is going to be there, two other people. I'm not too concerned about, you know, crazy legal fees being charged by a responsible panel overlooking an ethical question. I don't think we need to put any, you know, barrier, or I think we should let the panel operate independently is what I'm saying, that they don't need to come to us for approval.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And I would just say we
I would say that right now, this is, I would withhold judgment on that until this gentleman works with Stu on the setup, because
That's fair
he
enough.
may provide some compelling information to the board that makes us feel differently about that. For now, I would just be inclined to engage him, hire him to assist us with the ethics panel, and then I would assume we're gonna get on the phone, Stu's gonna do the legwork, but we'll all get on the phone with him at some point.
Yeah, and I think it's just also to keep in the back of your mind also when it comes to approving use of the attorney, if he's going to be helping and assisting me specifically set up this panel, he will be billing for that time versus just having conversations with him now, trying to get information out of
Yeah,
him.
of course.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, just,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. I have no problem if, I would make a motion to enter into this retainer agreement with Morrison Law Firm at the term set forth, and would ask for a second.
I'll second it.
All right, and I'll poll the board. Commissioner Rabin?
Aye.
Commissioner Laurie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Commissioner Winter? And Commissioner Roach?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, good. So, next up, we're gonna move to, public comments.
Before we go there, Paul Redmond's here. Paul usually does a 9/11 speech. Ask him if he wants to do it before that.
Sure. Well, why don't, okay,
He might want to do it at the end. I don't know.
yeah. Paul, we're gonna hold off on your comments until the end, is that all right?
Or he may want to do it that way.
Let's do it. Okay, anyone from the public want to speak?
Greetings, my name is David Weir. Again, you met with me, I met with you last meeting, and I don't have a lot to say, but I do want to submit two documents, or three documents actually, and just make a couple of comments about the issue of the wall between the Bronxville Firehouse and the Bronxville Cemetery line. First of all, you asked for the 2013 letter to Chief Grogan, and I do have copies of that, so I'm going to give that to you. Second of all, we went back on our files and we found January 1948 letters and April 1948 letters that talked about the wall. And it's a letter actually to John Crawford, who was the former manager of the cemetery back in 1948. I just want to read the first paragraph. As you know, we've been having some negotiations with the Eastchester Fire District and the Village of Bronxville about the location of the stone wall which separates the cemetery property from the Fire District land. The Fire District claims that the stone wall is over the line on their side and wants permission to remove it. The matter is under consideration by a special committee of the Board of Trustees, but nothing has been decided yet. Then it goes on talking about the possibility of an easement at the rear of the cemetery with the Village of Bronxville. And then I have Eastchester Fire Department letterhead to the Board of Trustees for the Second Reformed Presbyterian Church, which was the church identified, which is how the church was identified when it owned the cemetery in 1948. Dear sirs, in connection with the landscaping and grading of the land around the new Bronxville firehouse, it will be necessary for our contractors to remove the roots of trees near the property line between our property and the cemetery owned by you. In order to induce you to consent to our entering upon your land to the extent necessary, we agree that any damage to the existing wall or driveway resulting from work done on our behalf will be repaired by us, and that we will take steps promptly to restore the driveway and wall to their present condition at our expense. It is understood that neither our request nor agreement above stated, nor your consent thereto, constitutes a waiver on the part of either of us of any claims relating to the correct location of the boundary line between the two parcels. And then it goes on about if you're willing to give your consent. And then there's another letter 4 days later from the attorneys for the fire district that time to the church. So there's question as to whose side of the line is the wall on back in 1948. It never seems to have been decided, and so that's again why I am urging the board to consider a survey of their property.
Although we've already done that.
Say that again?
We already, Brian, you...
Did you have a survey done? Our guys that were working said they saw survey guys out there
Okay,
at the
I'm going
wall.
to tell you about the third thing.
Okay.
The survey people on our property is the Village of Bronxville. So you should know that the Village of Bronxville has had in the works for 10 years or so revisions and substantial upgrading of the Department of Public Works. And so you should be aware that on the back of the firehouse, which has nothing to do with us, there is going to be activity, plans proposed by the mayor and by the Council of Bronxville, the trustees of the Village of Bronxville. So you may want to know where your back line is as well as where the sideline is. And so at any rate, I'm working on at least trying to get a sense of how to repair the wall. I haven't gotten as far as I would like, but I may have a report at the next meeting. But I do want to submit the two letters.
We were going to have a survey done. I'm not really, what happened with that?
When I heard, the guys that were working said that he had already hired a surveyor, and I guess that they didn't speak to the surveyor. So Mr. Weir is saying it was village surveyor, hired by the village, I guess, to do their salt shed and where they park the garbage trucks. I believe they're going to do improvements down there behind the firehouse. So I kind of assumed that he had a survey done. So
I'm talking to him about a survey at least of the land, at least because the cemetery needs a survey first.
right.
But
And we had
you may
discussed,
challenge that survey. I don't know. I've never done a survey before, but you may want to.
well, we had discussed surveying the wall specifically and then splitting the cost.
Yeah.
Like not survey either property completely, but just to get that demarcation line of where the wall is. So I think the commissioners had empowered me to do that. And when I had heard that we had surveyors on our property taking things, I kind of thought that you had a survey done on your own.
That's the Village of Bronxville working on
Okay.
the back area there.
So I think if you're agreeable to that, if you paid half, that we could split the cost of a surveyor.
Let's make that happen, and then we can revisit, and you're still actively working on it with the contractor to see, yeah, all right, that sounds like the best plan of action for now.
Did you ever contact the
I have
contractor?
not yet done so.
Okay.
I don't want to do that.
All right.
Could I just ask roughly, how much would a survey for that square property cost, roughly? We're talking,
A survey of an acre of land, I had one out on Long Island, is generally somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000.
we
That's a general rule of thumb for me to get a survey done. What do you
I
think?
just want to know what it was.
I would think less, but
Yeah, especially if it's just the property line, we're
Just
not
the
doing the
property
whole
line with, just
four
spiking it,
boundaries.
$1,000, $1,200.
We can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you
Okay.
the letters.
When they do a survey, they just.
I think there is.
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else from the public like to speak?
Commissioners, Chief Tween, Lieutenant Ranello, Steve Celestino, 2 Parkview Place, Tuckahoe, New York. I'm a 62-year resident of Tuckahoe. I've only known the Tuckahoe Firehouse. I only found out recently when I met with Chief Tween that there's a Main Street firehouse. What I want to talk about is 2 issues. One, my mother is 96 years old. Your firemen have come to my house time and time again. Professional to the max. When they come in, they talk to her, they pick her up. She has mobility problems. Get her to the bed, get her in the chair. Professional. They're all professional. But I was a little shocked, Mr. Winters, now to hear that you want to disenfranchise her as a voter and not approve an absentee ballot for somebody that is on the permanent absentee ballot roll. She has lived in Tuckahoe, three addresses, 49 High Street, 8 Parkview, and 2 Parkview. She voted for the first president at age 21, Franklin Roosevelt. She has not been disenfranchised from an election since. She is sharp, she is cogent. Why can't she vote for you?
Well, she's going to.
But you were the vote that said no.
I was a vote that said no out of 5 voters.
You wanted to disenfranchise a voter.
The motion had already carried.
I know the motion is already carried, but I'm telling you, sir, and I don't understand it, how you could have voted to deny the right of a person to vote.
No, I knew the motion had already carried, okay? I was a person who, just so you understand, I was a person who sued the Bronxville school to make it ADA accessible. The reason why that building across the street is ADA accessible is because I was part of 3 people who made it so. I understand ADA more than most people you'll run across. So I'm not insensitive to the disabled, believe me. The question we have here, if we could do a voter roll that limited permanently disabled people, I would have no problem with that. It would be fine. My only fear is these very small turnout elections can be influenced by a very few votes by having a few active people manipulate people who are homebound. That's what I see.
She is on the permanent disabled registration.
I have no problem with that. If we could isolate that, if you could isolate permanently disabled, and that was the discussion we had. I don't know if you followed it. The discussion we had was, and my recommendation with the chairman here was, if we could isolate the permanently disabled people on a voter roll, that would be a good thing to do.
She's registered with the Board of Elections. It's a permanent registration. She's been getting it for the last 8 years.
Right.
But you voted no.
I voted no on the general where we get everybody going to vote. Because
you're still running an election.
Yes.
People have the right to vote. And even if they take the absentee ballot and shred it, they're exercising their right to vote.
But
you put your hand in her pocketbook for the tax dollar, but you won't let her pick the hand that goes in it.
Now, you have to understand, if you look at these elections, right, I understand exactly where you're coming from.
I know what you're going to say. It's not my fault that there's lower voter turnout. Apathy is abundant. Look at what we got now.
Well, what's wrong with
that? I mean, how could you have voted no, even on permanently disabled people?
We didn't vote no. We didn't isolate
you did,
permanently.
Sir.
No, we didn't.
Well, then maybe me and Mr. Laurie here have a hearing problem because you...
No, the discussion we had was, can we limit it to permanently disabled people? The chairman and I said if we could limit it to permanently disabled people, that would be preferred. Limiting those people to have the right to vote, the permanently disabled who we know are on the qualified list. That would be the preferred way to go. The problem you have is most people don't understand they cannot use an absentee ballot when they're still in the municipality. So if they show back up at the municipality at 7:30 at night from their job in the city, their absentee ballot should not have been allowed. So
but
it's
yet
the general abuse of
you're still not allowing a person to exercise their right to vote even through absentee ballot. They still have a right to vote.
Okay.
People have a right to vote.
Well, maybe this conversation...
That's what 9/11 was all about. They wanted to take it away from us.
No, maybe this conversation will help people come out and vote. Those who can come out and vote will...
Well, my mother can't walk
Let's see how many
home.
happens. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you show back up this meeting in December, and we'll go through how many absentee people actually voted. And we'll compare that list to who was on the permanently disabled list,
Well,
and we'll see how much
there's only
time
one
we
problem
spend.
with that, because if they say you send out, I'm just using a number, 100 absentee ballots, and you get 5 back. The 95 have used their option not to vote, but they weren't denied their right to vote.
Well, if you send out an absentee ballot request, you'll get it back. That's generally where it works.
But I was shocked that you voted no.
The motion had already carried at that point in time.
Yes, I understand, but it was still a no vote, sir.
Okay?
All right, I think,
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming to the meeting.
I believe next week is one of the deadlines to sign up for the 9/11 fund, just to register, I mean. And to register, all it requires is name, address, and what date you were there. And 17 years ago, we were given permission to go, but since we are not FDNY, we were considered volunteers at the site. And what I'm requesting is, if, God forbid, anyone that registers has to file for a claim for the money, they require a letter to say we were there. And I was just wondering if the department would give us that person that letter saying that they were there on that day. I mean, we know the days people were there and who went there, but is that something the department would give us if it's ever needed?
if we know that people were there, I certainly wouldn't withhold that information. Absolutely not. But it's difficult for me to answer that question without, speaking to was Chief Grogan our chief at the time? Or?
Chief Fenley.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know about the records. I don't know about,
I've researched the records extensively because we had we found a 9/11 file a while ago, right? We found a 9/11 file. The problem was the membership did not go down on salary, as the union president stated. The membership volunteered to go to Yonkers to stage, and then they went from there, or Mount Vernon, Yonkers, right? And then they went down to the city and worked the pile. They did that for a couple days, and then New York City got enough men to come in on overtime and sent the career guys back. We didn't compensate them for their time down there. They did it as a volunteer effort. So we don't have payroll records showing them down on the pile. But I think there is common knowledge between the chief and the membership who was there. I think they could probably give us a list. And if you look at in 2001, a lot of those guys have already retired, a number of them. A number of them have not. But we could probably generate a list. And I think what the union president is asking for is that when a member does present with an illness, that they be able to come to the department and we go to whatever records we have and supply a letter. I don't have any objection to myself personally that the department supply a letter to people we know that worked on Ground Zero who ended up getting an illness later on in life, that we supply them that letter that acknowledged them that they spent time down there, but it was not on a payroll, but it was on a volunteer effort organized by the department, which it really was. It was organized by the union/department. That would be my thinking, and I think it's relevant because as we see now, 17 years later, there are a lot of injuries related to 9/11, and a lot of sicknesses.
I agree with everything Commissioner Winter just said. We certainly, if we have that information, we would gladly give it and support anybody in that regard.
It may be a good idea to have the chief sit down with, I guess, Steve, you were the union president back then? Yes, I was. And Sean Stewart was the union president in between, after that? So I think between Stephen and Sean and Paul Rattalone and the chief, you could probably create a pretty valid list that we keep on our file, and then we'll know who's entitled to be on that list and who isn't. And I'm pretty comfortable we're not going to get any names just floating on the list that weren't there. I just think that I have full confidence we'll get an honest list.
So if I could just add a couple things, there would be two categories, because we did have people that were on the clock, went down with apparatus to the firehouses in the Bronx. While the Bronx companies were down in Manhattan, we were covering at the firehouses in the Bronx. Those guys were exposed to the guys that came back from working at Ground Zero. Their turnout gear, they walked in the firehouse, they were covered in the dust. So we could potentially, for 3 days, 9/11, 12th, and 13th in 2001, we sent a ladder and a truck down with 4 people, a captain and 3 firefighters each day. So I think those people would get a letter saying that they were on duty and on the payroll getting overtime or getting their regular salary. when they went down to the Bronx firehouses because they were potentially exposed to the 9/11 dust. The second category is the volunteer category, that they went down through the organized union. What White Plains is doing, I spoke to their chief. They write a letter for the member that says, firefighter X was on our payroll at that time, which means they would be covered by the pension system. Because it is a pension system, they would cover them for, a disability retirement or a disability pension. And that this firefighter was on the payroll, and they report to us that they went down to ground zero on X day or whatever day that they want to say. So they're not admitting that because they don't know as a fact that they went down just because they said they went down. But White Plains is providing a letter, White Plains Fire Department is providing a letter to the pension system saying, he reports to us or he makes an affidavit that he was at, ground zero working. So that would be an option too. That's what some other departments have done. Because if we don't have knowledge for sure, do we want to say that,
Well, I believe the union president was specifically talking about the victim compensation fund, to register for it. I think that's a geographical area, like below Canal Street. So,
right.
So responding, even though, like you said, you're being exposed to World Trade Center dust, if they actually weren't physically in the zone, the World Trade Center zone, wherever that is, that won't be applicable. So basically what I'm saying, all your paid guys are out because they didn't go down to the zone. Now, if the union did organize groups and they went down to help and they've spent whatever hours it is, I think that's a matter of a notary republic and the members identifying each other. Yes, I saw that he was present at the scene. Right. So that's easily done. I don't believe a letter from the Eastchester Fire District is necessary, but it certainly can be provided.
It asks for a letter.
Okay. All right, very good.
Steve, you want to go to the mic because you want to take
It needs a letter if you're going for a benefit. To register, you don't need the letter. If in the future you're going to make a claim, at that point, then you would need the letter. So I'm not asking, we don't need anything right now. Just sometime in the future, if someone should make a claim for 9/11 related illness, we could have it then.
I mean, Vinny Spadaro was downtown on the work the pile, right?
Right, and there's some, can't take
yes.
advantage now, but probably could have, yes.
Yeah, his estate should keep that in
Well,
mind.
does he
in the next
have
48
a
hours.
widow? A widow?
Dead.
No, does he?
No, he died, but he has a...
His estate should think about that.
Okay. Anyone else from the public at 916? All right.
Jerry, Jerry's coming.
Hey, good evening, guys. Jerry Napolitano, 11 Bronson Avenue. I just wanted to get a quick summary on the DeCostanza settlement. How much money was that? That was 20?
Around $27,000, I think, all in.
27, and then the fire hydrant settlement, you said was settled as well?
$160,000.
So $160,000 was settled with the town of Eastchester. The other thing is, this ethics board, I just want a little bit of clarification on it. I mean, is it basically put in place so you guys behave? I mean, it's what it seems like.
One reason. There are others, but it's...
So, I mean, we're hiring a lawyer at $235 an hour so that you guys abide to the bylaws?
All right. Here's the thing. There are some things, in my opinion, that are clear-cut, and I think I've seen members of this board acknowledge that and recuse themselves. We've had two members of the board have recused themselves from matters recently, and I think that there are issues that come up that are clear-cut, and people do the right thing. There's a lot of issues that have been far more nuanced, and some that I think have been completely without merit. Accusations of ethical lapses and misconduct that I think have been completely unfounded. And unfortunately, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately, our own law firm, basically serves the board. And they do not want to serve as ethics counsel because they need to have a good working relationship with all members of the board. So unfortunately, we couldn't go to Coughlin and Gerhardt, and that's not unique to Coughlin and Gerhardt. That is something that's very common with general counsel providing counsel to fire districts. So the question became, like, how do we deal with this? What do we, we have an ethics panel. It's, described in our code of ethics, yet as long as I've been on the board, and I believe while you were on too, no panel was ever empowered, ever existed. So we decided that it would be a good idea to get this panel up and running, to contact several lawyers with expertise in this area who are, capable of assisting us in forming the panel, and then getting residents of the community to join the panel to hear these issues. And so, unfortunately, I do think it provides a deterrent to some extent, because if people are going to make charges that really don't hold at all, I think that will be fleshed out by this panel. It might be embarrassing for the person making the charges. And at the same time, I think, people will make charges that are valid charges that a commissioner just, for whatever reason, either intentionally or just can't see it himself, and may need to be recommended by this panel. So
that seems like a change, because when Commissioner Rabin originally brought it up, I thought it was going to be more of a community effort, and the community making a decision on whether it was going to be ethical.
Oh, it is. That panel is going to be, where we're looking to get community members to join the panel. But first we need to, it's, in order to form the panel and decide who should be on it, first we need to figure out, the number of people we're going to have on the panel. What is the process to hear an ethical matter? Like, can any commissioner or any employee of the fire district, for that matter, access the panel unilaterally, make a charge, and get them to respond to it? Should there be another mechanism where first it has to go through a screening committee before it goes to the panel? What happens if the panel, and I'm hopeful that we'll get lawyers and people who have backgrounds in these areas, are able to kind of, they'll know the law themselves to some extent, but there are going to be cases where they're just not going to know what legal precedent is, and they might want to speak to, ethics counsel to advise them.
So the law firm of Morrison, I don't believe, has experience with fire district laws, do they?
I can't speak specifically about the law firm, but the individual lawyer that we hired absolutely does. That's one of the reasons why he was recommended to us.
All right. Thanks for that update. And then I wanted to get an update on the Volunteers Officers Association case that's going. Some status on that, and with the Supreme Court judge in that case?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we foiled the two volunteer organizations, the VOA and VBA, for financial documents. They did not turn them over readily, so we had to pursue legal action through an Article 78 to get the documents. At this point, according to the judge, Judge Blackwood in the case, they have satisfied the request for information. We believe there's still, I believe, some minutes from 1 year from one of the organizations that we were still hoping to get, or receive an affidavit from the court stating specifically that the officers cannot find those records and they cannot reasonably reproduce them. But for all intents and purposes, that case is over. The documents have been provided. We have them. We've reviewed them. I believe, some commissioners have tried to get others to take an active role in reviewing them, and that's where things stand right now. We discussed at the last meeting, it may have been the meeting before, I think, you know, generally speaking, everybody was kind of unhappy on the board that this played out. As I said all along, I think the volunteers should have responded to that FOIL. It was a legal FOIL. They should have just handed over the documents.
Yeah, it seemed
However, be that what it is, they have their own side of the story about how they were willing to do it, but the bottom line is the FOIL's been satisfied. And I believe somewhat strongly that I would love to see a volunteer force that's active, vibrant in the community, and that can assist in fighting fires. I think you know, we've spent a lot of time, I've been, you know, pounding on this table for months now about these out-of-control overtime costs, and I view the volunteers as a potential solution there. I view them, so I am hopeful. This all has just happened recently, right? It was only within the last month that the judge determined we were awarded settlement fees, which they paid, or excuse me, legal fees, which they paid. And so now we're turning to the next phase of what we're going to do next.
So what was the settlement that they paid for the lawyer fees? What did that end up being?
We spent a little over $80,000, and the legal fees awarded were $39,000. So net, it ended up costing the district $40,000 to get that information. We knew that going in, that, you know, it's typical that you're not going to be awarded 100% of what you spend on these matters. But the board determined that it was important enough to get the information, to get a sense of what was going on there, that we were willing to spend it, and we did.
So, I mean, as you know, I foiled all the checks, and you guys sent them to me. And I did a little bit of a forensic analysis on it, pretty straightforward, pretty fundamental. You bring up, you know, wanted to bring volunteers back. I would go back to the VOA and find out why they spent $240,000 in recruitment fees since 2013, and who were the people that they spent that $240,000 on. So there's one thing that you guys can all look at as a board and question where that $240,000 went, which was, I believe, taxpayer money as part of the 2% give back that comes down from the state.
Jerry, you should be aware the board foiled in May the 6 volunteer fire companies, like the Tuckahoe Hose Company, the Bronxville Engine Company, the North End Hose Company, the Rescue Hook and Ladder, Waverly. We foiled all those fire companies. And this is right in after the original lawsuit cost about $120,000 between the VOA, the VBA, and the fire district. So $120,000 of taxpayer money was sent up in flames. We foiled the 6 fire companies in May. We foiled the VOA because they represent the 6 companies. And then we sent appeal letters to the person that, under oath, we were told were the treasurers of each of those companies. And we've gotten no response. All 6 companies have totally ignored the FOIL. And this is after $120,000 of taxpayer money gets burnt on the first round of FOILs. So, what do you think?
I think that when I was on the board, it was inevitable that we were going to find this information, and you did, and I'm glad we did. Does it surprise me what we found? No, because they were always persistent on not wanting to show us the books, not wanting us to show us the checks, not wanting to show us what they were doing with, including subsidizing commissioners' election funds, including paying them out directly and not knowing where that money was going, which is all contained now in the information that you guys foiled, okay? There's things in there such as $70,000 in weekly dinners. I'm not sure a volunteer organization, I still don't know how many members are made of it, but even if it's 20 of them, $60,000, $70,000 a year in dinners, for what? They never show up at fires. They're going to debate the fact that they weren't invited to fires because the fire chief said they weren't allowed, but yet they're spending $240,000 in recruitment. They're spending $240,000 in recruitment. Who did they recruit?
All right, that order for the...
Are you speaking as a commissioner?
Yes.
Or are you speaking as a VOA member?
No, I'm speaking as a commissioner, okay? And I know what I'm speaking as, whether it's time to speak as a volunteer, time to speak as a commissioner.
I asked.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, Okay, that order was given through Commissioner Winters and the former chief.
So
And
the
that
commissioner can't give that directive, so I don't know where you're getting that from, but go ahead.
you're gonna let me finish?
Only the chief can.
That was given through those two gentlemen, and it was sent to the Board of Fire Commission. Not one commissioner voted on it. That was only done because the efforts of Commissioner Winters orchestrated that because he did not want volunteers around. And he was the same commissioner that begged the volunteers to get him elected, and not only 2 months after he got elected did he stop stoning the volunteers. The volunteers were doing their jobs. The volunteers attended classes, they attended meetings, they attended trainings, and in fact, Chief Tween, when he was a captain, he was one of our training officers. We had training at the Parkway Oval, we learned how to draft, the men learned how to draft. The men went down to Chester Heights, they went to the incinerator, and the men were doing their training at that time until Commissioner Winters and the former chief decided we don't want them around no more. It's not that they weren't doing their job. He didn't want them around anymore. And those two organized it to put a stop to the volunteers, and that's where that stopped. And I got a letter right here to show that he told the volunteers to stand down. That's why the volunteers stood. It came from Chief Grogan, and it came from Chief Grogan because Commissioner Winters told him to do that.
You got that from Chief Grogan?
I got the letter right here.
So you got the conversation in the letter from
Right.
Chief Grogan that went to Commissioner Winter.
It went to the
Winter
board.
said-
It went to the Board of
Winter
Fire.
said, "Stand down, we
It
don't
went
want-
to the
we don't
Board of
want
Fire
I'm
Commissioners.
speaking, right? You gave
Okay.
you your time.
Well, I'm trying to tell you the
You
answer.
have proof.
I got a letter right
In
here.
writing and letter that Commissioner Winter told Chief Grogan to get rid of the volunteers and stand them down.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll foil it. I'd like to see it.
All right, Jerry,
Okay.
can I say
Okay,
something?
not only that, the commissioners don't have the right to do that. The fire chief does that.
There's no such-
And if Chief Grogan made that decision, he probably made it for some good reasons, and I respect that.
He made it because Winters told him to do that. That's what I'm
The
telling
board
you.
is made up of 5 members.
And they
Okay.
got a letter from him, and not one commissioner
From who?
voted on it.
From who?
From the chief.
What year was this?
2005.
And who was on the board in 2005? It was made up of all ex-firefighters.
Yeah.
And fire chiefs. And you're going to say just because they got it from...
Oh, come on, they worked together.
You're
you
saying
know it.
because they got it from the minority commissioner
Yeah.
on that
All
board.
right, Jerry, we know,
That's
I know why you
did.
came here, because he invited you
Can
here,
I
Jerry.
just,
You're not baloneying me.
All right, so the other
You can
question I
baloney
have-
everybody you want, but you're not baloneying me. I've been around this town all my life. I'm not a newcomer. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately.
No, you're not, but...
You're damn right I'm not, and I know other people that.
Can I speak?
You came here to break stones just like this guy's been breaking them on me for the last 3
I didn't even
years.
speak your name.
No, but you slandered me in the paper.
How
You
many years
didn't. You
ago?
didn't slander me in the
many
paper.
years ago?
When I was running for commissioner.
That's
You
not called
didn't.
slander.
You didn't tell. You didn't tell the public that I was. You didn't tell the public that I wasn't a college graduate. You didn't tell the public I didn't know about business life.
Oh, we have
That's not slander.
No. Well, you don't even know my background. How the heck did you able to put that in the newspaper? You didn't know my background. You didn't know me until you came here.
Commissioner Laurie, do you know what slander is?
Yeah, I know what slander is.
It's when someone states something that's not true. Did I
Come on,
state something
Jerry,
that was
Jerry,
not true?
Jerry. You two
If
guys
you have
did a
another
good
question,
job.
please ask it.
Come on,
We want to
Jerry.
move on from this. Anthony,
Okay,
please.
the other question is, since you brought it up, in these checks that I foiled, since 2013 to 2015, Commissioner Laurie's been taking $16,000 to manage a monument. I think that's all.
I just, listen,
You know,
Dennis,
you
Dennis
guys
is.
got your answer
Let
that.
me speak.
Volunteer firefighter Tom Vishy told you the answer, told him the answer. You guys ain't satisfied with that. We did it through the lawyer again tonight. You guys got your answers. How much more do you want? How much more do you want? You got your answer last month.
I'm not finished. I think that might be your first case you want to bring up in your ethics committee.
Yeah, I will. And guys like you, we need around here.
Oh, you want me to volunteer on the ethics
Just
committee
let's-
then?
Yeah,
This is-
yeah, why don't you?
This is devolving into something that really is unnecessary, but I want to just.
No, it's not unnecessary.
Mr. Chairman, I
Right.
think you should stop
Can
this
I-
because
can I
this
please-
man- This man carries this on, he brings him here, he just irritates it and just keeps piling it
I'm not
on.
gonna let this go
He
on.
has
I'm
not
gonna make a
raised his
motion.
voice.
I'm
He
not-
has not
I know.
raised his
I know he didn't raise his voice, I did. But you got a habit, Dennis, of carrying something on. You never let anything die. You got your answer.
Anthony, stop. Listen, we're not gonna let this
All
continue.
right, so I want to close it out. All I want to say is, you guys now have this foiled information. I have it as well, and I would ask any other citizen to ask for a copy. I can email it to you, whatever you want. And I think it's time for you to start looking at this forensically and start questioning some of these costs.
Okay.
They're
Jerry,
very inconsistent
Just, I want to be clear about
and
something.
unethical.
When I talk about wanting a vibrant volunteer organization in the community again, I am talking about a reboot, okay? Where there's complete and total transparency. We know what's going on with the records, the money, that there is, you know, if existing members are going to play by the rules that, you know, we all agree to, that's great. But also, theoretically, we want to bring in new, younger people to be part of it. So I just want to make that
Totally
distinction
agree.
so you're clear.
Totally agree.
Now, as far as kind of what's gone on historically, listen, Commissioner Winter has detailed this stuff. You're not providing any new information here. I appreciate that you're a concerned citizen and you want to do this. The question for me becomes, like, what does this amount to? Like, what are we questioning and what do we want to spend to pursue what's going on here? We uncovered information, we got a sense of what we believe may be going on. At this point, the Board of Fire Commissioners is not a law enforcement agency, we're not a regulatory agency, okay? We are a Board of Fire Commissioners handling the administration of this district. I am not going to try a bunch of volunteers over those expenses. At this point, there are law enforcement and regulatory agencies that have been doing this throughout southern Westchester, throughout New York State. They are aware of what's going on in this community, okay? And if they believe that there is something there to investigate, at this point, they're going to do it. But from my perspective, this is over. I'm not saying I'm happy. I'm not saying I look at that and I say, oh, this is great, or this is fine, this is acceptable. But what I'm saying is, at what point are we going to allocate the time and resources to this? We've done a lot already. Now it's time for those agencies to take over and for this board to focus on rebuilding Chester Heights, to buying new fire apparatus, to changing policies that are detrimental.
I get that. I totally get that. You say the goal is to reinvent the volunteers, right?
Yes.
You have Commissioner Laurie that, on the most part, just sits there and claims that the volunteers went away because of Commissioner Winter. That's total BS, as we all know. But what I don't see is the volunteers trying to renew themselves, okay? If you have a situation where someone told you to stand down, wouldn't you go back as a volunteer organization and try to fix it and make it better?
Jerry,
Volunteer organizations all over the country, all over the... Let me finish. Volunteer organizations all over the country, all over the state, I work with them, okay, through my volunteer efforts that I do with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, invent themselves in middle school. What have you guys done to even invent yourselves for the middle school kids? Have you done anything? Have you done a Young Explorer program? Have you done anything like that? Nothing, nothing. You guys have done not a single thing. All you did is sit up there and complain about why you can't go to fires. But none of you have reinvented yourselves at all. And the board here needs to enforce that component, because you guys are able to do that. You guys are able to enforce whether the volunteer organization is doing the right thing for our district. And you could turn that on and you can turn that off. You could throw them out of the house and you can tell them not to show up. And that's what they've done in the past.
So
if they show no level of improvement, if they don't, why don't you get them through a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-step program? When I was commissioner, I gave them literally a grade school book on how to start a volunteer fire department. It was never used. It was a grade school level reading book on how to start a volunteer
Jerry, I agree with the sentiment about starting a new fire, volunteer force or strengthening what we have. But I do think you're a little bit off base on, it has been a hostile environment. Now, and I like I said, I've had my frustrations, okay, with some of the volunteer stuff. But at the same time, there's been a lot of accusations being hurled at them, and the environment has not been conducive to some of the things that you're suggesting should have happened over the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, simply just were not possible. I think I personally would have liked to have seen it. It was not possible. And partly because of actions that they took, but also partly because of actions that took place by some members of this board. So I believe that.
So spending $240,000 in recruitment for the last 5 years couldn't kick off in a Young Explorer program in the middle school.
I'm not saying that.
Where did that money go?
You're putting
Mr. Napatano, you keep saying that number. Now, I'm assuming that's a line number. I read it myself, right? But there had to be individual checks.
Correct.
So who were they written to?
They're written to the Tuckahoe
You have
Hose
this. I
Company.
foiled this. It came from.
I know.
They're written to the Tuckahoe Hose Company, which Anthony is reportedly the treasurer. They're written to the Waverly Engine Company. They're written to the North End Hook and Ladder. And these companies are refusing to tell us how they spent their money. So how do you rebuild a fire district or a volunteer company when that ain't even going to tell you what a check
2013 recruitment, ladder 17. 2014 recruitment, East End Ladder Company. East End Ladder Company number 2. 2015 recruitment retention. North End Firehouse. Rescue Hook and Ladder, $3,400. Rescue Hook and Ladder, $11,000. 2015, Rescue Hook and Ladder, $4,000. Okay, you want me to name them all? I give it to you.
Jerry,
this.
Jerry, this is information. If anybody wants it, it's available via FOIL. So by all means, but I said my piece on this information.
So all I'm saying is, challenge them on why they're spending $240,000 in recruitment, and they haven't even started a Young Explorer program. And for them to hide behind the excuse that Commissioner Brogan told them to stand down, you know it's total BS. Come on. If you are dedicated to create a volunteer organization, a chief that told you to stand down is not going to affect your Young Explorer program. Okay? It's not. Because you're going to be dedicated to want to build up that organization and make it better moving forward. Make it better every day. Not sit behind it and make excuses on why it wasn't created because the chiefs said to stand down.
You're not going to start a Young Explorer program and tell the Young Explorers that, yeah, by the way, we can't fight fires because they won't let us. Come on.
But Peter, that contradicts what you just said. You said you want to create a volunteer organization.
I do.
You don't create that overnight.
I agree. What I'm saying is, at this point, we need a reboot. We need to do it.
That is the reboot.
Okay.
The reboot is you got to instill.
You're asking why over the last 3 years they didn't do that. And the reason I'm telling you is that there was a hostile environment between the board and the volunteers. Say it was all their fault. Say it was all our fault. The bottom line is that existed. And there was a stand-down order in place. So they weren't going to be doing these initiatives. I want to focus, like I said, if there's wrongdoing, there's enough light on this now that there are plenty of law enforcement and regulatory agencies that should take the ball here. I want to focus, and I believe what the board should focus on, but we'll decide collectively on how we're going to make this better going forward. And that's really,
You and I are both saying reboot. We're both saying the same thing, by the way, Peter. Yeah. All I'm saying is, now that you have these records and you understand where the recruitment dollars went, they should be accountable for it. And it should be accountable all the way at levels of maybe the middle school. Because that is where you're going to instill that type of attitude of a boy or girl who wants to join the fire service. You're not going to do it someone who is looking to do this in their 20s or 30s. You have to instill it in a young person. That's all I'm saying. And it's not there.
I don't want to prolong this, but I'll just make one comment. The last 3 years, we've started our litigation to get these documents in what? We first tried to get the documents in 2014. The volunteers didn't answer. We wrote the New York State Committee on Open Government a formal letter in 2015. The Committee on Open Government responded to us to that letter in January 2016. We reinstituted the FOILs, and the volunteers basically ignored the FOIL requests, the FOIL appeals. They ignored a judge's order to turn over the documents. They ignored a second order to turn over the documents. The judge decided to have 2 days hearing for contempt of court,
repeating the same thing,
which they finally turned over the documents. There was no hostility on the part of the board other than pursuing a legal agenda to get the documents. At any point in time, the volunteers could have turned over those documents in those 3 years. So I find it offensive that it was, the board was so hostile, because we exercised our right to get documents
I
in the
didn't
state
say the board
Supreme
was so
Court.
hot, I said there was a hostile environment
Because they had to
between.
turn over.
And we did, I'm going to say the same thing like you keep repeating the same thing. We offered to sit down with you, and you were the first one to say no.
All right.
So, okay, so.
Okay, here
so
we
what
go.
does offer to sit down mean, Commissioner Laurie? What, Commissioner Laurie, what does offer to sit down? Not divulge
Jerry,
these financial records that had to be divulged
We
under a
asked
judge?
Ask him.
Commissioner Laurie, what is it that you're saying? You said sit down. What does that mean?
yeah,
We asked him.
What does that mean?
What did he say? No.
So first of all, I was asked to sit down by your lawyer and your treasurer, who legally isn't even supposed to be your treasurer.
You don't know what you're talking
Levin.
about.
Levin. I'm talking about lawyer Levin.
He's an honorary chief, and he was able to be here.
Town bylaws does
Listen,
not
we've-
allow
we've
a
covered all
member to
this.
be
We need to
outside
move
the
on.
town and be in
Jerry,
a volunteer
Jerry,
organization.
I'm sorry, but we need to move on. This is
Okay.
covered ground, so.
Well, I didn't get an answer from him. What do you mean by sit down and go over this? What was
We
you
offered
expecting
to
to get
show
out
you
of
what we wanted. Tom Vichy there, he was offered to show him that, and he refused.
How come you didn't show it to me? The same.
He was the
question
chairman
asked
of
me?
the board.
What does that have to do? You could approach any commissioner. What about when I said no, I was going to sit down? I actually responded with, you want to meet with me outside a public session as a standing commissioner? I said no. Why would I do that? And that's the answer I gave your lawyer.
Okay,
Okay.
we need to move on. Paul, do you want to speak? All right.
One thing about growth and retention. In all your time on the board, on all his time on the board with Mr. Winter and Mr. Baker, and I think you were the youngest one on the board, 13 applications for volunteers came to this board. Through the Chief Grogan, who I got to say, his reply for everything I ever asked, I'll run it by Dennis. I'll run it by Dennis. 13 applications. One application was voided because the individual lived too far out of town. Where are the other 12 applications?
I haven't seen them.
There you go. You didn't want to see them, that's why. Tell the people that's what you didn't want. You didn't want them to see.
Okay.
Paul?
Everybody's bored. I got to run it by Dennis. That was the answer.
Good evening.
Good evening, Paul.
Thank you for
coming
allowing
again
me
this year.
to come up to the board. 17 years ago today, on this date, I was off duty. I was at my family business on Mill Road, and my sister came into work at a little after 9 o'clock, and she said, I just heard on the news that a small plane hit the World Trade Center. And I didn't think much of it at the time because I remembered that during World War II, a bomber hit the Empire State Building, and I think the city kept it to like a 5-alarm job, and they, very few people were injured or killed in that particular incident. It wasn't until several hours later that I found out what the magnitude of that incident was. And the following was what happened the rest of that week. From Wednesday, September 12, 2001, through Sunday, September 16th, the Eastchester Fire Department sent a fully manned engine and ladder company to cover Bronx firehouses or to stand by at Yonkers Raceway for deployment. I was at Station 1 and remember feeling worried about these mutual aid companies, not knowing what might happen to them. On Thursday, September 13th, Mount Vernon Fire Department Local 107, in conjunction with the Westchester Professional Firefighters Coalition, was able to contact officials in New York City in order to organize a relief effort. After getting approval to do so, they contacted all the professional firefighter unions in Westchester. In a matter of a few hours, 120 firefighters from all over Westchester met at Mount Vernon Station 3. Included in that number were 10 firefighters from Eastchester. 2 EFD members were able to get 3 buses at no cost. One of those members was Vinnie Spadaro. Shortly before 7 p.m., the 3 buses left Mount Vernon with state police escort to Manhattan. Almost from the time we turned onto West Side Highway, people lined both sides of the street with signs and flags, many thanking us and cheering. Signs read, "God bless you," and "You're our heroes." The buses parked off Hudson Street on Beach Street. Upon arrival, all firefighters were organized into 10-man companies with either a lieutenant or captain in charge. I took command of the Eastchester contingent. We walked from the buses to the staging area, 1 block from what has become known as Ground Zero and what the firefighters called the pile. Along the way, people on the sidewalks clapped and thanked us, offered us water, food, gloves, masks, anything else we might need to do our work. Walking along, we could see and smell the smoke from what was once the World Trade Center. At the staging area, we saw an engine and ladder truck on a side street. The truck's aerial was mangled and bent over the cab. The engine was recognizable only by the front part of the cab where the officer and driver would sit. Everything else had been crushed to about 5 feet high. On the officer's door, someone had written in memory of the lieutenant and firefighters who had apparently all been killed. After getting permission to proceed, we passed a parking lot filled with burnt-out cars. We stood in front of 3 World Financial Center, now used as a rest and rehab station. Construction workers cut up the fallen North Bridge in preparation to move it out of the way in order to gain access to the main area of debris behind it with heavy equipment. We walked between 3 and 4 World Financial Center along the Winter Garden atrium and into 2 World Financial Center to the front entrance on West Street. From this point, we got an unobstructed view of the massive destruction. From this entrance to World Trade Center, from the entrance to World Trade Center, a distance of about 400 feet, were steel box beams lying parallel, about 3 feet apart, on top of 10 to 15 feet of concrete and other pulverized debris. There were several hundred rescuers and about a dozen bucket brigades removing debris from around the 7-story stump of the tower and passing it down to the front of the financial center, where it was dumped and the empty buckets returned to the front of the line. Iron workers cut up steel beams, which would be passed down the line and thrown onto the pile. We filled in on several of these lines, balancing ourselves on the box beams. In some areas, you could look through the rubble and see the remains of a fire truck or ambulance. Several of our firefighters attempted to tunnel beneath the box beams in order to look for victims below us. Every so often, someone would yell to be quiet. The generators and power tools would be shut down, and everyone would stop working and just listen for any sounds from the debris pile. After a minute or so, work would continue. Looking up around the middle of Ground Zero gave a clear view of the destruction. Every window facing the Twin Towers had been blown out, and chunks of buildings had been gouged out from falling debris. The sides of the remaining buildings were covered in a thin coat of powder that could be seen floating in the air through the glow of the floodlights. It was several inches thick for many blocks around the site. Despite the hard work, early Friday morning, it got noticeably cooler, and about 2 a.m., it started to rain, a drizzle at first. Suddenly, it started getting heavy, making footing treacherous, and since we were working in T-shirts, the rain just made us wetter and more uncomfortable. An FDNY chief officer called off operations, and our chief officers decided it was time to go back. So we picked up our gear, headed back to the buses. On the buses, we were tired, cold, and wet. There was little, if any, talking on the return trip to Mount Vernon. I began to wonder what we had accomplished by going down there. We moved perhaps a couple of tons of debris, a literal drop in the bucket of the estimated 1.2 million tons of rubble. We had saved no lives, only 1 body had been recovered. Yet for 8 hours, we had been willing participants of a piece of history, something people will talk about long after we were gone. We were the first group of firefighters to go down to Ground Zero, but not the last. 2 shifts of Westchester firefighters, Eastchester included, per day responded to the World Trade Center site over the course of the next several days. The only reason this effort was discontinued was the FDNY went to a 24-hour schedule with half of their personnel working at any one time, meaning they had enough manpower to send to the site and man the firehouses. Whatever needed to be done, or whatever we were asked to do, we would not have hesitated on this new day of infamy, September 11th, 2001. Respectfully submitted, Paul Ranalone. The EFD personnel on that day of September 13th were myself, firefighters Quentin Baker, Joseph Pinto, Stephen Ranalone, Jay Rockhill, Ken Simonides, Glenn Strawbridge, Brian Tween, Vincent Spadaro, and William Wiggleman. Starting on September 11th and continuing for days, weeks, and months afterwards, ordinary people, organizations, and businesses donated money, food, water, clothing to victims and rescuers. A couple of weeks later, the Local 916 had a Fill the Boot raiser at the intersection of Mill Road and White Plains Road and collected over $20,000 for the FDNY Widows and Children's Fund. 1 week after 9/11, an estimated 6,000 people filled the property outside Town Hall for memorial service with political representatives from Eastchester, Tuckahoe, and Bronxville. The clergy of almost every faith that had membership in the town offered words of blessing and comfort to all. 3 police departments, the fire department, EVAC, were all well represented. Weeks later, the fire department and police department played a charity basketball game. Local 916 sponsored the collation at the funeral for Fire Marshal and Tuckahoe resident Ronald Buca at Concordia College. Members attended numerous funerals. Thanks to retired FDNY Lieutenant Bill Spinelli, and as a result, a direct result of our sale of the FDNY 343 hats, George Glover Jr. and I were invited to attend the FDNY memorial services held inside Madison Square Garden in October of 2002. Although it was a cold, rainy day, about 30,000 firefighters from across the country and around the world marched in a parade prior to the services. It is amazing what can be accomplished when people put aside their differences, get together, and work for the common good. And as a side note, Lieutenant Bill Spinelli, and as a result, a direct result of our sale of the FDNY 343 hats, George Glover Jr. and I were invited to attend the FDNY memorial services held inside Madison Square Garden in October of 2002. Although it was a cold, rainy day, about 30,000 firefighters from across the country and around the world marched in a parade prior to the services. It is amazing what can be accomplished when people put aside their differences, get together, and work for the common good. And as a side note, last week, the FDNY had a service for the 177 firefighters who have passed away since 9/11. And there are also another 2,000 people who have died since 9/11 of 9/11 disease. And hopefully, no one from Eastchester will be included in that number. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
No, moment of silence.
I just got one more. I just got 2 things I gotta let you know. On September 30th at 10 a.m. on the California Road and Route 22 is Gold Star Mother's Day, and the veterans are honoring the Gold Star Mothers at a half-hour ceremony or so if anyone wants to attend. Also on September 30th at 3 o'clock, there's another tribute to the honoring the Gold Star Mothers and the soldiers who passed away in Afghanistan and Iraq at the Kensico Dam at 3 o'clock on September 30th.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting tonight in memory of all first responders, civilians, and members of the military that have been lost as a result of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks.